Welcome to the NYU Steinhardt Jazz Interview Series, and today I'm interviewing one of the great composers in jazz, Carla Bley. Thanks for joining me today, Carla.
You're welcome.
So I want to get some background on you, just to get the skinny on your career, and then we'll take it from there. So we're going to improvise. So you're from California originally?
I can't improvise though, right?
No, let's write it down.
Okay. I'm from California. Yes. I know that.
Yeah. And what about, when did you first get interested in music?
My father was a piano teacher and my mother was a pianist. So it just came with the territory. And as I learned to walk and talk, I learned music.
Now, I was listening to an interview with you and Steve. You were in some hotel sitting at the foot of the bed. You know that interview?
Mm-mm.
Okay. It seemed like it was in Europe somewhere. And you had said that you wished you had started playing piano earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were studying piano...
I should have started at the age of 1. Yeah, I didn't play my first concert until I was 4. That's a real problem.
But so I guess the difference was you were studying classically then. And where did you get the jazz bug from?
You know, it wasn't really classical. I was playing 3 Blind Mice on the Black Keys when I was 3 years old with my fist. And then I was singing This Little Light of Mine and collecting money in a tin cup at church. And so it wasn't classical. It was church, really.
But were your father was a piano teacher?
And a church organist.
Ah, okay.
And a church choir master. And so the church was our entire social life, entire. And so it wasn't that hard to go from church to jazz. I think maybe classical to jazz is virtually impossible if you do it later in life. You just can't relax.
So there was a connection. I was watching a video of you with Charlie Hayden's Liberation Orchestra where there were a lot of spirituals.
Oh.
Remember that?
No, but that makes sense.
Yeah. And so how did you get into the compositional aspect?
I started that early too. My father showed me a piece of music manuscript paper because I had asked him, where does this music come from? Who wrote this down, you know? And he said, well, there's composers that write this stuff, and this is the paper they use to write it, and here's a pencil. And they just put a lot of dots on the page, you know, and you play whatever the dot says you should play. So I took the paper and pencil back to my room and came back the next day with it filled with little black dots. And his advice, and the only advice, was less dots. Get rid of most of those dots. And that was my first composing lesson.
So, in a sense, you developed music through a sense of discovery instead of a sense of this is what music is, somebody else telling you what it is.
Yeah, no one told me. My father told me, but he said, this is how you do it.
Right.
Interesting.
But was there a more formal process that you eventually went through?
No.
You never studied music formally?
No. I quit when I was 8.
Okay. So let's get into 9 and beyond. What was the first jazz record you heard?
I didn't hear a record. I heard a live band, and it was Lionel Hampton, and it was the Oakland Arena, downtown big space in Oakland. And I went there with a friend of mine from school and heard Lionel Hampton play Flying Home, and the band was marching up and down the aisles, and I thought, this is better than church music.
Wow, was that in the 40s?
Yes.
Yes. Wow. So what were your thoughts?
I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
I never knew that you shouldn't do things that were not appropriate. I thought you could do anything you wanted to do. So I did it, sort of slowly. And then I think I must have been 13 or something when I heard that. And then the next thing I heard was quite different. It was cool jazz. I heard Jerry Mulligan and Chet Baker at the Black Hawk in San Francisco. Then I was, I think, 14.
Wow.
And so that was quite different. But it just was all the same thing. I wanted to do that too.
Was that the pianoless group?
Yeah.
Wow. Did you think those guys were cool?
I really did.
Yeah.
I did. And as a young female, I thought they were cute. So.
You didn't talk to them?
Oh, no, I still don't.
Yeah.
I'm shy.
Mm. So do you feel shy when you're performing?
No. I feel shy talking to you, but I don't feel shy when I'm at the piano or leading a band or anything.
Well, you know, a lot of people are like that. They're on. It's like I always heard Johnny Carson was like that.
Really?
Yeah, he was on in front of millions of people, and then he'd go to a party, he'd stand in the corner and wouldn't talk to anybody.
That's me.
Well, I'll be Ed McMahon today. You could be Johnny Carson.
Okay.
So, when you saw Lionel Hampton's band, did you think, how did you want to be a musician? Because you ended up being a composer first and then a pianist. Did you want to, this is what I want to do, is what you said.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
I'm reviewing it, and I think maybe I didn't say this is what I want to do. Maybe I just said this is the music that I really, really am attracted to.
Mm-hmm.
I maybe didn't know that I could do it, or I just changed what I listened to, though, rather than how much is that doggy in the window? I sort of graduated to Miles Davis, and then the only thing I wanted to do was get to New York City. So when I was 17, I hitchhiked across the country and went to Cafe Bohemia and sat there and watched Miles with the band that had Philly Joe Jones, and I think it was Paul Chambers, and I think it was, I didn't know who they were by sight, so I'm not sure, but it probably was maybe Wynton Kelly. I don't know. Maybe that was early.
See,
Red Garland.
Red
probably.
Garland.
Yeah.
Cannonball, Coltrane.
No. Who was the tenor player? My God, the mind boggles. Could have been any of those guys, right? I didn't pay attention to the saxophone so much.
What year was that? Mid-50s?
Yeah, mid-50s. I have to count from my birth date every time you say that.
So, did you travel across the country by yourself?
Oh, I found this so strange, it's almost unbelievable. I went with the son of the concertmaster of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, who came into a club where I was working as a piano player. And I said, I want to go to New York. And he said, me too. And so where did we get the car? It wasn't ours. Oh, no, maybe it was ours, one of ours. And then we borrowed a credit card from a friend who didn't know about it, but we used the credit card to buy gas and whatever the gas station had in the way of food. This is so...
They had credit cards back then?
Yeah, a credit card. It was a gasoline credit card.
Oh, like something like...
Mobile gas or something. And that's how we financed the trip. And
you sleep in the car?
Slept in the car and bathed in the rivers and got to New York City. This seems unbelievably glamorous, what I'm saying, but I have a lot of parts of my life that are not that glamorous, but this one is. So I slept in Grand Central Station. I guess I was a homeless person when I was 17 with other homeless people, and went to, tried to get into the jazz clubs. I got a job at Birdland as a cigarette girl, and that's how I got my education. I was able to work in nightclubs, either as selling cigarettes, stuffed animals, photography, the one that takes a picture of you and your girlfriend at the table in Birdland to commemorate your being there with someone who wasn't your wife, usually. And what else? Coat check.
So did you actually have that cigarette table?
Yeah, I had the tray.
Wow.
You know about trays.
Yeah.
Wow. I had a tray around my neck with either animals or cigarettes in it.
And the animals were some guy with his date.
Yeah. There was a lot of dating going on in those days.
What was the feeling of Birdland back then? I mean, that club is now a strip joint. Right?
Is it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's been a strip joint as long as I've been in.
Wow.
Not that I've been there to see the. But.
It was wonderful. I just thought it was wonderful. That world appealed to me, even though it had nothing to do with my past. And maybe that's why it did. Boy, you'd have to go down those long steps and then we'd get greeted by Pee-wee and shown pornographic photos by him before you could get by him, and then go into a restroom and change into your uniform and go sell cigarettes. But I hardly sold anything because I was listening to the music, and if someone asked to buy a pack of Luckies, I said, wait till the solo's over. And I was really strict.
So was the manager proud of you? Get out on the floor.
Yeah, and I had to hand in all my tips, and if I didn't make enough tips, he would take the money out of my paycheck, and so I had to make at least $25 in tips every night, or pay for it. It's stuff like that. It was crazy, and it was very interesting. It was mafia run, and I was a part of the underworld. And I thought that was so great, the underworld.
Was that Morris Levy?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was, and it was Oscar Goodstein, too. They were partners, and they would tell me what to do, and I can't believe it. A little girl from Oakland.
So did this give you enough money to have an apartment?
No, but I stayed at a hotel nearby, a block away, and it's still a hotel. Well, Steve just pointed it out to me. It's a famous jazz hotel, the something, a block from 52nd Street and Broadway. But it's a famous hotel. I forget the name. And I stayed there, and I made enough to pay the rent, but never enough to go home. And to go back to California, which was, I thought I'd better go back to California. So I just stayed in New York. But if I had the money, I would have left.
Wow. And why? Because you weren't, you didn't feel like you were accomplishing anything, or you were homesick?
No, I wasn't either of those things. So why did I want to go home? I don't think I wanted to. I think I just said, if I wanted to go home, I wouldn't be able to. Oh. That's probably what it was. So I might as well stay. And then I went, that's when I met Paul Bley. He bought a pack of cigarettes. And
Luckies?
Luckies. Well, he didn't smoke. He just bought a pack of cigarettes. I don't know.
Well, at least he didn't buy a stuffed animal.
That would have been embarrassing.
So did he buy the cigarettes to meet you?
Yeah.
Oh.
And the next day we were at Jones Beach, and we fell in love and got married.
Wow. How quickly was that?
Not quick.
So that's just the falling in love wasn't that quick then either.
No. I sort of traveled that way through one man or another to one place or another, and with him I ended up in Montreal, and I escaped from my scene. But when I went back and actually lived with Paul Bley, I had to get a job, and then I was usher in a movie theater. Then that's how I made my living, as an usherette. I was an usherette. And that's it was just not the kind of life that leads to a secure and a secure life, but it was incredibly creative because I always made sure I had a piano and a desk, and I wrote a lot of music.
Mm-hmm. Did watching movies, being an usher, did that interest you, listening to the soundtracks, or did you become a movie fan from that?
Both things. I saw The Seventh Seal maybe 500 times.
Wow.
The movies used to play forever.
Yeah.
Just months and months and months on a little place on 8th Street in the Village, Art Theater, something like that. And then Wild Strawberries, all these Bergman movies. That's what I loved. I loved the Bergman movies. But then when I switched from Paul Bley to Michael Mantler, I became a movie fan, and we would sneak into all kinds of festivals and things. Or I don't know how Mike figured out how to get us passes, but he did. He was I always thought he was a financial genius, but I found out later that he just borrowed all that money, and then he had to pay it back, or somebody had to pay it back. But he was good at that, you know, here I live in the country.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have done that if I had not met Mike Mantler.
So you were fortunate, going back to the movies, you're fortunate that you were in a kind of an artistic theater because you saw Bergman and all these, it wasn't like silly movies.
I think I must have chosen the theater,
Yeah.
and that's what I must have been interested in.
But hearing those movies over and over again probably broadened your horizons and understanding
of Swedish.
Like, Swedish cinema.
Yeah.
And plots and all those things that may have informed your music?
You know, I loved that movie, Seventh Seal, so much that the day before we switched to another movie, I went and saw it as a customer and sat there. I knew it'd be the last time, and memorized words and things. And I haven't seen it for a long time. Is it as great as I thought it was?
Yes, yeah, it's great. What about the music from those movies? Did that never attracted you?
No, I don't remember the music from those movies at all.
Because it's interesting, you move back into the 20s and 30s, and you think about all these composers, Ellington, whoever, they were all going to movies, so they were attracted by soundtracks or the piano players before sound movies. So I always find a connection between jazz and composition and cinema because those movies were so, the film music was so important.
Well, not in those two. You'd think I would have noticed.
Mm-hmm. So at that time, let's go back to Birdland for a minute. Who did you, Paul came up to you. You would have never gone up to Paul.
And say, would you like to buy a pack of cigarettes, you handsome guy?
No. Chewing gum. Did you say, because I would always watch those old movies and the cigarette lady would say, cigars, cigarettes, chewing gum.
Wow. No, we didn't have any
Oh, you
gum.
didn't have to. Oh.
Who wants gum?
So who else, did you talk to anybody else at Birdland?
No, I didn't talk to a single musician except Dick Hyman. He's the one guy that, besides Paul Bley, that came up and talked to me. You know, I was just a fly on the wall. I had no social life to speak of with anybody. And I watched, you know, my favorite bands. And that's another thing with the bands. They would come back a lot. Like Count Basie just was at Birdland for years, and a week at a time, or every Monday night, or something like that. And that's where I learned a lot about big band. My whole education was in the nightclubs of New York, and that was it.
So your composition process became baptism by fire, test, try and retry, rewrite.
No. pretty much got it right the first time
Okay.
that I remember. But then I didn't write anything that would confine a player to playing something that wasn't easy or quick. I specialized in easy and quick.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people played my tunes. The rewriting is coming later. I've been working on what to play in my left hand during one sequence of a tune we're going to be playing in July all week long.
Mm-hmm.
And the rewriting is more serious now. But in those days, the pieces were so short and quick, and they didn't really get rewritten. They get just sometimes changed as the player used them as a jumping off place for a springboard for a solo.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the pieces got changed, and that was fine too.
So who were the first people that started liking your tunes and recording them?
Well, the first one was Paul Bley,
Mm-hmm.
and he was quite amazed that I was a musician and could supply him with a full, stable of tunes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it worked that Steve Swallow came onto the scene and worked with Paul Bley, and then afterwards worked with Jim. Oh, that was Paul Bley too. Both Paul Bley and Steve Swallow worked with Jimmy Giuffre, so Jimmy started playing my tunes.
Mm-hmm.
And then with George Russell. It was a sort of small world, and Paul and Steve were in George Russell's band too, I think. Mm-hmm. And then Steve took the tunes with him whenever he had a gig with someone else, and if Art Farmer needed a waltz, he'd say, I got a waltz right here. Carla wrote one, and it's really easy and quick. And we would give it to Art Farmer, or Tony Williams would come by and say, I need a ballad. What do you got? That's really happened. Tony Williams came up my 5 flights of stairs and asked me for a ballad. But to me, that wasn't weird. It's only weird now, talking about it. I just thought, oh, well, of course. I mean, I'm the store, and he came to buy something. I never thought that it was strange. And then later, when the Jazz Composers Guild happened, which was a big deal in history, I just thought it was something we just did. It seemed sort of appropriate to get together and try to change some of the stringent rules in the life of the nightclub musician.
Mm-hmm.
And now I look back, and everyone else looks back and said, wow, that was formative for a lot of people. Got them into thinking politically about conditions and trying to change things, and it probably influenced me to start my own organizations like record label and distribution service and big bands and stuff like that, because I thought this is, obviously nobody's going to do it for me, so I have to do it myself. And that's what I did, not knowing it was a big deal. And it was a big deal. I'm very interested in my early life now.
Well, how do you pose an interesting question. If you're so shy and retiring, and then all of a sudden you're doing these grandiose things, not realizing that they're grandiose.
Yeah, that didn't require a lot of human relations.
Mm-hmm.
That just required, the business side of it, trying to get the business side together.
Mm-hmm.
And I still was not on the scene at all.
Mm. Was somebody helping you at the time? Paul, maybe?
No, Paul was gone. He was, now there was Michael Mantler.
Mm.
And he was another composer who couldn't get a record deal. And so we started our own label.
Mm-hmm. Did you start it here?
I don't think so. I think we started it before here.
Mm-hmm.
When we lived in the city, yeah. Yeah, we were living in the city at that point.
I had the opportunity to study with Jimmy Drew for years ago, and I came from Iowa, and I didn't know anything about anything. So in the early '80s, all I'd heard from Jimmy was the Four Brothers.
Yeah.
And the big band stuff. So I moved to Boston. Mr. Jufrey, I'm so excited to study composition with you. I'd like to learn more about the Four Brothers. He goes, I'm not into that old shit.
Did he really?
Yeah. He goes, oh, because I didn't know the things that like the things that he had recorded with Steve and Paul, like Jesus Maria, things like that. And it's like that was totally eye-opening to me.
Wow. Well, that goes back, doesn't it? Wow.
So in a sense, you come to New York and you see these bands and you see possibilities, I think, and you really, I think you've carved your own niche. You've carved your own way, doing something that certainly very few women have pursued a career path your way, and organizing these ensembles and being so prolific in all your compositions. So you probably didn't even think about this at the time. You're just this is what I want to do. So you know what? It's I hate to say this, but it's like this is a you're kind of a model. I don't know if you want to be considered a model, but you're an example of somebody who dropped away from the norm and found their own path.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it's like, how do we, this is why we interview people, is because I want to know how the heck did that happen, and how do more people follow your path?
So in other words, you're interested in the educational possibilities of if someone figures out what was possible, they would pursue that?
Well, you know what? Finding your path, finding a direction, not following a pack, and say, well, I have to be a doctor because my father was a doctor, or how do you find something that interesting for me is like doing something that nobody else has considered.
But my father was a piano teacher, so
True.
I
So,
didn't leave the pack.
So you didn't fall far from the tree.
Right.
You acorn, you.
Yeah.
But he gave you something that allowed you to move forward in a direction that he would have not considered.
He let me run wild. My mother died when I was 8, and my father let me just run wild. I could ride my bicycle all night long, and I could bring 10 bales of hay into the house for a party. And those are just two examples of everything my father let me do. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really know what the limits were. I would say to anyone interested in pursuing a life in music, it doesn't work out if you don't have the goods. You can't you can't leave the pack if you can't leave the pack. Mm-hmm. You have to have something going for you, like a talent. Mm-hmm. So if you can do anything but music, I would advise you to do it. Music is a cruel master, and you can't you don't have enough power to have your life in music in terms of building a house or eating food, mm-hmm. stuff like that. Living in what I meant was shelter and nutrition. That's mm-hmm. hard for musicians, and don't do it if you don't have to do it. There's a lot of people doing it now because the schools are turning out educated musicians that are totally amazing, can do anything, and just so much talent, so much, what is the thing, that drive, mm-hmm. so much drive. And you get there, it's like in a European country, you get educated by the government to be a jazz musician, and then what do? It's just
join the military.
Wow, no. That's an idea. That's how a lot of people got started in music. Mm-hmm. But it's a hard life, you know.
So would you have changed anything if you could go back?
No, I can't believe I got to where I am.
Yeah.
I have everything I can imagine wanting. What do I want still that I don't have? I got something I've been wanting for years yesterday. I got eraser refills that I had gone in every store in Europe on tours. We'd have to go to a stationery store. I'd have to bring my pencil and I have to get eraser refills. And for maybe 10 years, they didn't make them anymore. And Steve just found them online. And yesterday I got them. And then Steve found out that my lead wasn't the right lead. I had bought Danish lead. It was the best lead going at the time. And he found that a saxophone player, Chris Cheek, found a better lead in Japan, or Korea it was. So now I have a drawer of lead and a drawer of eraser refills, and I can no longer think of anything I want.
How about the pencil that the lead goes into?
Oh, I had those. I had all the pencils.
Can you imagine if this video goes viral, all your fans will send you erasers?
Oh, they already do.
Oh, okay.
Everybody tries, and every time I say I need something, I get an odd package in the mail.
So what do you get for Christmas?
For Christmas, we used to get a bottle of wine, a fine bottle of wine, and we stopped drinking 2 years ago. So we haven't had a Christmas present since.
It's a sad life.
No, it's wonderful. Sad life. Without Christmas.
Maybe a lump of coal, maybe.
I'm sure there's some kind of a story in there somewhere. It could be a fable of some kind. But at a certain point, I guess as a writer of music, those things are so important and you live with them day in and day out. And if you don't have the right tools, you curse and get up and walk around and look through all the drawers in your house to find the last stub and write something and it's not dark enough and you write further. It's a horrible thing to not have the tools for whatever you do.
And you write at the piano?
I write at the desk mostly, but I get the idea at the piano. And then I soon graduate to the desk if it's for a large amount of people.
So you can hear the compositions in your head?
Yeah, well, of course, I hear everything in my head. So do you, probably.
Well, what I'm saying, I'll sit down at the piano. Oh, I like that chord, and I like this chord.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Oh,
exactly.
I got it from you.
I maybe so. I don't know, but it's that simple for me to sit down at the piano and play the chord, and that's a chord started everything on the an yet unreleased album. When Charlie Hayden died, I immediately went to the piano, and I said, I know what Charlie's favorite chord is, and I played it on the piano. I thought, well, this is sort of a nice way to say goodbye. And I played it again, and I said, that could, aha. And I got a pencil. I didn't have a good pencil. I had a stub of a pencil. And I said, and it maybe could go, and so that first chord turned out, no, the last chord. I thought it was the last chord. And it turned out to be the first chord of a huge piece that I wrote that's on an album coming out in the fall. But it started with a chord that he liked. I didn't even like it.
What chord was it?
That I'm not going to tell.
Okay.
I've been asked that, and I thought it's really such a banal chord. You know, I don't think that Charlie would like people to know what chord he liked, and if it wasn't some big thick thing, you know.
So do you listen to other people's music?
I do. For 4 months a year, I listen to other people's music, mainly to get my music out of my head. So I'm now a student of music.
And who do you like? Or who do you listen to?
Wow. Well, changes. I could just, off the top of my head, say, do you know Charles Warren?
Mm,
He's a classical composer. He teaches at Columbia.
I don't know him.
Well, I think he's probably the best composer I ever heard. And we play his music regularly and know it quite well. And we've listened to everything he ever recorded and don't like it all. But some pieces, and I have to put in a plug for this, the Blue Bamboula, a piano piece played by Garrick Olson, you have to get that version of it, is probably the best piece I ever liked. I won't say the best piece I ever heard, because I've heard a lot of great pieces, but maybe I didn't like them.
Mm-hmm.
I like this piece so much. I know from the first note what piece it is. And it's only one note, the first piece. The first note is one note. And it's a C, I think. I think it's a C. Great piece. So I would say Warren. Then I would say, well, I like everything Horace Silver ever wrote, with hardly any exceptions. But mostly that music of the, whatever, you would probably know the year, Sister Sadie and stuff like that.
Late 50s, I think.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't ever remember the numbers. Then I like, back over across the fence, I like a lot of the stuff that Shostakovich did. I feel pretty close to it. Although I don't like that all either. I just like a lot of the stuff that he wrote. And I like the stuff that the musicians in the band wrote for Count Basie. Count Basie didn't write the pieces himself. He had a bunch of great writers in the band.
Thad Jones,
Frank Foster, Frank West, Ernie Wilkins is my favorite.
Neil Hefti.
Neil Hefti was who I was thinking of for Atomic Basie, yeah. Those records are, that just lifts me up and makes me very happy no matter what's going on around me. That's happy music, and I love it. And then I could go on, and it would take an hour because I follow a lot of Beethoven's not bad.
He's pretty good.
Yeah, I really like him a lot, although not everything again. Then I would have to go to, I like the Motown book. All those people that wrote for Motown, and I like, the Temptations and I liked This Is Worth Waiting For, but I can't remember the name. Okay, never mind. The stuff that Marvin Gaye sang was always wonderful, and there's quite a few people wrote for him, and so in other words, it's like a lot of different kinds of music. Charlie Parker is a sort of a course that you take when all of a sudden you decide to listen to Bird for a week.
Was Bird still around when you were at Birdland?
He was, and I didn't hear him. I heard him, but I didn't see him because I stood outside of a club trying to get in, couldn't get in, and I heard him from the stage, and then he was dead a week later, a month later. So that was 56, 7?
53, I think.
No, really?
Maybe it's 54, but it wasn't 56.
It wasn't,
54.
Wow. I'm either older or younger than I thought. Those years.
Well, we'll rewind the tape and move it forward.
Well, I used to lie about my age anyway. First, I took 2 years off, and 20 years later, I put 2 years on. No. First, I put 2 years on, and then took 2 years off later. Yeah.
This is why you're taking that math course.
Yeah, you see? I am. I'm taking a course called Math and Music that I intend to study this winter. When it's too...
Well, you've already got the music part done, so you just have to study the math.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, what was George Russell like?
Oh, I can't believe I skipped him. He was a wonderful uh, character and musician, and I always liked him a lot. And he was never happy with what he did when I heard him live, and I always was. So that was another thing. That music was fascinating to me. And I was his copyist for a while. I got paid.
In the 50s or in the 60s?
I don't know. I think I copied some of the old music, even stuff like the most famous early piece.
All About Rosie? Oh,
Probably,
the Cubano
probably.
beat Cubano Bop.
Probably, and the other piece, something about Lydian something.
Was that the in Stravinsky's Yard?
No,
Okay.
didn't do that one. But some of those pieces, and I'm trying to think, there's a famous piece that I don't remember, and that was influential, and then...
There was this tune called The Lydiot.
That was it, The Lydiot. I liked that tune. And I could hear all the notes, and he just said, wow, okay. In your payment for hearing all those notes is you have to be my copyist. So I did that for a while and learned a lot about copying.
You weren't around when he was doing those TV shows for, I forget the critic, and there was all the jazz cats. It must have been late 50s, because Bill Evans was on the session, and they did Concerto for Billy the Kid.
No.
It was with Art Farmer and Jimmy Cleveland. It's all on YouTube now.
I was around, though, when Dave Sanborn had his TV show.
Right. You were on that TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great show.
Wasn't that a great show?
I love that.
Impossibly good, yeah.
Who did they pair you up with on that show?
Oh, man. Pretty Fat. It was a band of 3 big women called Pretty Fat. And then it was, see, Steve is not here, so I can't ask him who was a wonderful a bass player that was...
Marcus Miller was...
No, this was from the pop world, or the rock and roll world. Forget his name. And then,
Wasn't Sting.
Nope.
No.
It was, and there was the guy that just died recently from New Orleans that was a producer and a great writer of...
Was it Alan Toussaint?
Yeah, he was on, and boy, it was nice company.
I have to say that show was a moment in time that I don't know will be ever captured again.
Yeah. So I didn't know that George Russell had a similar thing in the late 50s.
Well, it wasn't a steady TV show, but there was this series of, there was interest in jazz. And every so often there'd be somebody producing a series. There was one with, called The Sound of Jazz in like 1958. That was the last time Billie Holiday was heard on television.
Wow.
But Sanborn's thing was really a series.
Yeah.
And that was really something.
Yeah, it was. Never happened again. Philip Morris bowed out.
Yeah. Well, let's start a TV show. You have a studio here. We have cameras.
Yeah. Okay. Who'll we get? Steve Swallow.
Steve Swallow.
There's his bass right over there. I don't think that'd be a problem.
So who were your friends in as composers?
My friends as composers, Mike Gibbs is still a friend of mine, and he's a guy that every time I hear him, a new piece of his, I burst into tears, if that's a credit. I can't believe it. Something in me collapses and dissolves when I hear Mike Gibbs. It's dangerous, really. So he's a friend of mine, but I see him only once every 5 years. We're sort of hermits. I live in Woodstock. but not in the town, way up on a mountain. And I don't see anybody. I don't really see anybody. Oh, Jack DeJohnette at the post office, because we have the same post office. And Dennis McCrell at the, well, when I used to drink, I would see him at the liquor store. I just worked with him last week in Hamburg. He was at a big band piece with the boys choir, and Dennis was the drummer. And that was like the first time we'd worked together in 15 years, and he's just a neighbor of mine, really nice. Woodstock is a musical place. All kinds of music, not just folk music, which is what most people might think. But a lot of jazz musicians live up here, and a lot of classical musicians, and pop, rock and roll musicians, and some country musicians, everything.
Didn't Dylan live around here?
Yeah.
And Pete Seeger?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So did you bump elbows with those guys?
Nope, I never bumped elbows with anyone but Jack DeJohnette and Dennis McCrell once. Because I live here alone. When I'm on the road, I eat in restaurants. I speak to 100 people a day. I get up on a stage. I talk to huge audiences. I do interviews. And when I get home, I want to cook, garden, and write music. That's what I do. I don't go socially anywhere.
Who were your favorite musicians that you've worked with?
Steve Swallow, Andy Shepherd. I liked the band I had. I liked Lou Soloff. I liked Wolfie Pushnig. I liked Andy Shepherd. And who was the other guy? Gary Valente. How could I skip him? He was the greatest trombone player I ever liked. Again, I won't say heard. I've heard a lot of trombone players, but I liked Gary Valente to the point of very powerful and the most musical person. There's a solo of his on the last record I did with him that is a composition, and he made it up as he stood there. I don't know how people do that. My mind is so slow. And some people, it just comes out of them in a big rush. I mean, maybe it's the only thing good happened to them that day. Maybe my life is too good to have that benefit as well, to be quick. So I'm sort of slow. And I play slow and I write slow, and I have to be alone.
There's nothing wrong with ballads.
Nothing
Tony
wrong with
Williams.
ballads, that's right. Yeah.
Well, when Tony Williams came up to your apartment and he said, "Do you have a ballad?" Did you have to play it for him?
I did. I played it for him, yeah. I wouldn't have had to, but I did. That was the weirdest thing. I think this only happened twice, so I'm not saying that it came up every week, wondering what was on the menu or something, you know. I think it happened a couple of times. I went to his house once with some tunes. The Art Farmer stuff was all Steve Swallow. That was the go-between. And I think Paul Bley used to try to give a lot of things that I wrote to Sonny Rollins, and it never happened. Sonny never played them.
I just have your discography. Let me just check something.
Maybe that would help, yeah.
You did a lot of records on your own, that's for sure.
Yeah, in the 30s, I think, somewhere. 30, from the record company, Watt and Extra Watt, about 30 albums. And now I'm an ECM artist.
Well, all right, I'm just going to hit you with some names, and you hit me with a thought.
Okay.
All right, let's see here. Steve Lacy.
Beautiful sound.
Mm.
What a sound.
That's what I would have said.
Yeah,
I played the soprano. Gary Burton.
Still in the works. He asked me to write some tunes for him recently. So I did. He's taught me so much about how to play, but I've never learned any of it. Like, always end your solo with a flourish. That's something I dream of doing. and I've never had a flourish yet. I end with a huge accident usually, and just stop playing because there's no recourse. There's nothing to do but stop. And so Gary Burton, what a role model. He really is a great player, and something that escapes me totally about the execution involved in playing that great.
Okay, Don Cherry.
Natural soloist, plays melodies that could be tunes. One of my favorite players for many years. I can't think of one note he ever played wrong. Absolute. So that would be my one. If I would, wish I'd waited to say that first. Don Cherry. Perfect.
Okay, Charlie Haden.
Let me think. Sound, time, scope. I think time and sound are perfectly good enough, but Charlie had a lot more than that. He got a bunch of bands together, and he had weird, wonderful objects, or subjects. No, weird and wonderful purposes, like the Quartet West is all movie music and stuff like that, and the Liberation Music Orchestra is Spanish Civil War. I mean, and then of course his playing with Ornette, he knew exactly what to do. He didn't play any mistakes either. But then when you don't have chord changes, how do you know when it's a mistake? You just believe that that's the perfect note. When you play chord changes, you could have a mistake that doesn't work. A lot of mistakes lead you onto a new, beautiful idea. I would give anything for those kind of mistakes right at the beginning of everything I ever played, but I don't get them too often. But there are other mistakes that are just a tragedy, that ruins the piece. Forget it. Don't play. Don't play anymore. Go back to the piano. Learn. Study. Oh, but as Charlie Haden, beautiful taste in music. I would have to say something negative. I haven't said anything negative about anybody yet.
Well, we're not done yet.
We're not? Okay.
So, okay.
Well, I'll leave Charlie out of it then.
Okay, good. How about Jan Garbarek?
The first thing that comes to mind about all these people is extra musical usually. Hard Candy. I would follow him on the road, and he would insist on having hard candy before the show. And if he didn't have hard candy, he would make sure he got some. That was wonderful. I thought that was so great. But of course, he's a gorgeous, gorgeous player. And the candy is just a nonsense comment by me.
Paul Bley.
Paul Bley, awfully talented, like stupidly talented. I mean, he never practiced. I could attest to that. He never had to practice. He was just born to play music, and he just played it easily and loved to play it and had a good time, and nothing negative at all about that.
Steve Swallow.
Steve Swallow, I can't imagine having I think if something happened to Steve Swallow, I think I would quit. I don't think I would play anymore. The only two guys I ever played with, bass players, seriously, was Charlie Haden and Steve Swallow, and I can't imagine playing with the others. Both of those guys have unique styles, for one thing, and Steve doesn't sound like anyone but Steve, but that guy can walk. He's got perfect time. He's got a sound that he works on constantly. His sound is more than his instrument. His sound is his amp and his speaker and his chords and his model of bass and the fingerboard and his pick and he's got this. He works on this all the time, and he has a bass. What do you call those people that make guitars?
Luthiers.
Luthiers. He's got a luthier that lives in Woodstock, which is like having a dealer live in, if you were a drug addict, living next door. And he just works on his bass all the time. And I think he sounds great all the time without working on his bass, but that's his drug, working on his bass. But I think he has the best sound, best time, definitely best time of any living bass player on any kind of bass, I think. My God, people say, I think it's time for you to play with Steve Swallow sometimes. Sometimes they say that. I think it's time to play with Steve Swallow. Like you could learn a lot by playing with him. And I play with him, I could play with him all day. I could play with him 24/7 is the number, right? And I do sometimes. I say, I can't figure this part out. Come on down, let's figure this out. And he'll play it, and sometimes he'll say, well, maybe we should play it up an octave. Actually, usually he says, maybe we should play it down an octave. But, I'm starting to babble. I'm not really saying anything important. I feel like now I'm really sort of slipping.
Well, then I'd like to thank you. You know what? Before we do that, a lot of people will watch this, and you're such a unique person. You've found your own path, and you've pursued it, and you found a way to succeed. Do you have any words of wisdom for people that are also looking for something in their life? Maybe not music, but maybe music. But how do you keep that passion alive?
Wow. What else? Is that question is like so monumental. I don't know how to answer it. Well, I have a daughter, and she never even asked me for advice, and I never taught her to play the piano. And you would think that I would do that because I could influence her. I could say, no more hamburgers unless you play the C scale, something like that. But I stayed away from that completely. And she became a musician anyway. But I've never given her advice. I've never given the one person that could have supported me in my old age advice. So I don't know what I would say to someone I didn't know. It would be something silly. Like either keep at it, don't give up, or don't bother, it's worthless, or you have to be yourself, or play like somebody else, or, no. It's not in your hands. It's not in your hands what happens to you. I don't believe it is. I don't believe that all the hard work in the world will help. I don't believe that knowing everything about music will help. I think listening is a good way to learn. Maybe that's the safest way to learn. Listen and love what you hear, and then say, I wish I could do that. And then work on it. Well, I'm getting into this stuff. And then work on it all the time. And I don't know what to do after the listening part.
Turns out that you had words of wisdom in there.
I did.
So, yeah, you found them.
Oh, gee.
Carla, thanks so much for joining us today. You're a prize. You're a gem.
Well, thank you, and it was relatively painless.
I have to tell you that Bill Frisell, I interviewed him, and he says, I don't talk in front of camera. I don't talk. And he says at the end, he goes, "Thanks so much for talking for me." And I shook his hand. It was like a wet fish,
Oh, right.
cold fish.
Look at these.
Well, listen, the reason I brought him up is you're in good company.
Okay, good. Yeah,
Okay.
I love when I find out that I'm not alone.
You're not.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.